Hi guys, so welcome back to my YouTube channel, and today's video let's talk about JavaScript functions. So what are functions in JavaScript? So let's get started. So functions in JavaScript are one of the core building blocks that helps developers write clean, efficient and reusable code. So what a function essentially is a group of code that does a specific function, and it can be reused by other steps in the program. So we are going to explore functions, and we'll be using a simple analogy of a box. So think of a function as a box. Let me open a whiteboard. So let's create a mirror board so that I can show you. But as it is loading up, so think of a function as a box that you give in some inputs, and then it does something and gives you an output. So you might have seen like a microwave. So in a microwave, you input some food that you want warmed up. That's an input, and then you give it instructions, and then it does something, and then you open up and get something out. So essentially that's how functions work. So let me just try to okay, so this is a box, and then this one is a box, and then this box we give it some instructions. We give it some instructions. So this one is an instruction, and then the box does its own magic. So this is magic. This is magic, and then the box gives us something. And then this box, we can reuse it again. So as soon as we are done, we continue with our program. Continue. This is our program is continuing, and then we find out that this box was being used to add a plus b. So we give it, these are called, we have two terms here. We have parameters and arguments. So a parameter, these are the placeholders. So we want this box to add whatever we give it. So we have to give it two items, A and B. And then the box does A plus B, and then returns us the result. So the result would be the result of A plus B. So the placeholders for the actual, so these are placeholders we are using because we currently don't have an actual value. So we have A and B. So these are called parameters. And then bottom, whenever we want to use this box, we need to call it, because other than calling it, then how is it going to execute? So we need to call our box. So let's say this is our box, we call it, and then we give it some values. So this time round, the box was created with placeholders that we called parameters. And then the actual values we pass to the function are called arguments. So we pass an argument of 1 and 2, and we call the box and give it 1 and 2. So the box does its magic, which is addition, 1 plus 2, and spits out the result, which is 3. So that's the basic overview of functions. Okay. Yeah, so if you continue, so you can think of it as a box that you give it something, some inputs, and then the box does its own magic inside, and then gives out an output. So the box has to be reusable. So for it to be reusable, we use placeholder values that will be replaced whenever we pass. So if we pass 1 and 2, then 1 and 2 will replace the placeholders, and then the box will do its magic and return it. So we can do that again in our program. We can give it 3 and 4. And since we are simply filling in the gaps. So this is like filling the gaps. If you remember the Mad Libs, is it called Mad Libs, where you are filled in the gaps? Maybe I going. So whenever this Mad Libs is being created, it doesn't have the tense, and then you're supposed to fill I was going. You see, so whenever you are creating it, we did not have the value, but later on we came and filled in the value. So that's the same thing in functions. That's how functions work. Functions are reusable, and you should make it as reusable as possible so that it can be used by other people in the same program working on the same program, or it can be used by yourselves again. So let's assume you have a function that is responsible. So we have, let's call it a box. So let's call it a box. So we have another box here that takes in the amount, and then it does some calculations and calculates the tax. So like where I am, the tax is 16%. So it will do 16% and then spit out the result. So in our program, maybe we want to calculate the tax of 500. We give it to we call the box does it and returns us the new tax. That's 16% of 500. Later on in the program, we might want to get the tax of 1,000. We do the same thing, call the function, call the box, and then the box spits out. So this is how it is reusable. So this can be added in other files. And then you just call your function and everything is clean. So without further ado, let's get started. So just open my VS Code. So this is a new file. And then to start off with functions, we need first to look at the syntax of the function. So the function starts with a special keyword called function. So we have the function and then give it the name. So this one you can say function name, and then use this parenthesis syntax and open curly brackets. So this is commonly called the body of the function. So the body of the function is whatever is happening inside the function itself. So this is the body of the function. Okay. And as you'll come to see later, we have different types of functions, different ways of initializing functions. So this is the most common way. And this is what you should train with in case you are beginning to learn JavaScript. So this is the syntax. So we can create another function. You give it a descriptive name. As I said in my previous variable tutorial, is that you have to give it a descriptive name. So this function is called, we can call it calculate tax. So the reason we are using a descriptive name is because someone else might come and work on the same program you're working on. So you don't want to use difficult, no. Then this one return high. So you can see this is not readable. This is what we call anti-pattern. So whenever you're creating a function, this is the syntax you should follow. In case you're starting out, this is the syntax you should start with before learning the function. So the function keyword, the function name, then open the parentheses and the function body. Okay. So the next thing we are going to look is a special keyword called return. So a function, we have two types of functions. So there's a function that can return something back to you. And there's a function that will not return something back to you. We say it returns void. So the next thing we need to understand before even continue with the returning is that, but we can still continue. So this parenthesis here helps us to insert stuff inside the function. Whenever the function is being called, we insert something inside the function. So this one is what we call the parameters. So we add the parameters inside the parentheses. Okay. So let me just create another function. We call it greet me. Then this function we console log. So console logging is printing on the screen. Okay. So console logging is just printing on the screen. So if I do node index.js, you might realize we saw nothing. Now why was that? Because we just created a box and we did not use it. So to use a function, you have to call it. To call it, you use the you use the name and the parentheses. So this is calling a function. So function. So this is the syntax of calling a function. Okay, so now if we go and do the same thing, you can see now we are console logging. Console logging means printing out on the screen. Okay, so this is a type of function. We have another function that returns something. So it returns hi. So if we come and say greet me and come here and try to see whether there's an output, you'll find that there is no output in this function. Why is that the case? Because whenever you are returned something, unless you do something with the what was returned, then there's no even printing it out on the screen. So to see the output, we can console log the return of calling that function. Okay. So whenever something is returned, you can now store it in a variable. You can print it out on the screen. You can do whatever you want with it. But whenever a function does not return anything, I don't know. If we say console.log hi, so this function essentially returns void. What does returning void means? This function returns nothing. So whatever this function doesn't return anything, and if it doesn't return anything, then we can't even save the result to. So let's try. So we can say we can create a function called my greeting is equals to call that, and then console log dot log my greeting. So if we come and print out that, you can see now it's undefined because we assigned this variable nothing. So it's essentially, so this is similar to having it like that. It's undefined. Okay. So if a function doesn't return anything, then you cannot even store nothing. So there's no even a way we can store nothing. So a common use of function is returning. It returns back to the person who is calling it. Okay. So this function returns hi. So we can store that into my greetings. And we call greet me. Okay. We did not console log it. So console my greetings. So if we now come here, you can see we get hi because this one will be executed and the return of this function is what is assigned to this variable. All right. Yes. So the next thing we need to tackle is how to pass stuff inside the function. So to pass something inside the function, you need first to specify to the function that whenever I'm going to call you, I'm going to pass in something. Okay. So to pass in something to a function, you need to give it a name, and you can give multiple. So you can give it any type of value. So we can say name, age. You can create more as you want. And then whenever you're calling this function, it has to follow the same order. So let me just show you. So something else you might notice is when you use backticks helps you to insert variables dynamically. So we can do this. We can say name, and to insert the variables dynamically inside a string, we use the $sign and the curly brackets, and then you passing it inside. And then we do the age, then $age, then you do the school, then the $school. So you have to follow this order calling the function. So when calling the function, so let me just show you. You can see even when, by the time I'm calling the function says you need to pass a name, an age, and a school. So you have to pass them in that order. And you remember you have to pass in it a data type. Okay. So you have to pass a data type. So let me show you. So you have to pass one of the data types of JavaScript. So the name, you can say TechWithTwin. So here, just remember here we cannot pass in. There is not. Let me show you. It will bring an error. We cannot pass like anything that is not. So let me just show you. So if we go, we need to log this. So if you console log this, we get an error because what is TechWithTwin? What is this? This is not one of the data types of JavaScript. So you need to pass a data type of JavaScript that will kind of match what you need. So in this case, I need a name. So a name is a string. So I have to pass in a string. So if I now come and run this, you can see now the name, the age, and the school. So you have to pass a data type. You have to work with data types JavaScript. So you cannot work with anything else in JavaScript. So as I said, you can pass as many arguments as you want. So these ones, the name, age, and school are called parameters. And then these ones are the arguments. These are the actual values we pass to the function itself. All right. Okay, so you can go back and check. So we have the syntax, as I said, we have the function name, we pass in the parameters, and then you can call it or invoke. Invoking is calling a function and passing it whatever it requires. And if in case the function doesn't return anything, this function returns, gives back, or returns. So whatever it returns, you can store it, you can console log it. But if it doesn't return, then you cannot even store something that is void. We have different types of functions. We have the first function that I showed you, which is called a function declaration. This is a way of defining functions. The next way is called the function expression. So this, you use this syntax. And the next one is called the arrow functions. So they do the same thing as I have showed you. So I'll talk about the arrow function. These are not mainly common. What is common is the arrow function and the anonymous function. So the arrow function, so let's say we have a function greet me, takes in a name. You remember the syntax? And then it just returns. We can, if we don't want to return, we can simply console log inside because we don't care about the return. Your name is the name. So if I come here and call that function, so you'll see your name is undefined. I did not pass anything. You can see now the problem. Then pass TechWithTwin. Okay, so if now we go and run this, get your name is TechWithTwin. Okay. And the reason I added this space is to make sure whenever it is going to print, it is not printing. Let me show you. So your name is, so okay. So your name is, so I was adding a space because in case I was doing this, that would still work. But now if I remove this space, this is just for spacing, then you can see how they are lined up. That's why we add a space. But in case you use the comma to print multiple things, it will add a space by itself. So to convert this to an arrow function, the first thing you need to remove is the function declaration. So this is what we do. We declare a variable and call it greetme2, and then we set it equals. Now this is a variable. We open curly brackets and then the equal sign and the greater than sign, and then you do that. So let me just use greetme2 and then log. Let me just hard code this one. No, you can add a name. So if we call now greetme2, then pass in TechWithTwin, you see this is exactly the same thing. So what we did is remove the function declaration, the function keyword, and then now we created a variable that we assigned with using this syntax. And then you can see we have the same parentheses, and then we use this fat arrow. It is called the fat arrow because it has an equal sign and a greater than sign, and then the body remains. So something else you might note about this method is that in case we have one line, we don't have multiple lines of code, we can simplify it further by removing the curly brackets. Then if you have one argument, we can now remove even the parentheses. But the autocomplete is adding them, but still, you can see this one in many of the code bases. So this one is exactly equals to this one. Okay. Yeah. So this is how we write an arrow function in JavaScript. So, and finally we also have the arrow function that is anonymous, or maybe, yes, you can have an arrow function that is anonymous. So let me show you. In case we have a function like the setTimeout function, which takes in a function, you can pass in an arrow function that is anonymous. So this is a function. And then you can still do function, same thing. So it's still the same concepts of functions. So the arrow function, still the same function, is that this is a anonymous function more commonly used as an argument to another function. You can see the setTimeout is still a function. All right. So, and then the final one is something called the immediately invoked function. So this is a function that is invoked immediately. So let's create a function called greetme. Then this one console logs greet things. So, and then we call it. But what if we just want, instead of doing this, you can wrap the function inside parentheses and then call it. So this one is called an immediately invoked function. So if you run this, you see greetings, because this is the syntax. In case you have a function that should be called immediately, this is what you do. Right. So then finally we have examples. So you can see the function add takes in A and B and then returns the result. Then that result, after calling it, you can console log it. Same happens to the Fahrenheit, the Celsius to Fahrenheit. It receives Celsius and then calculates and returns, and then you console log it. And that's it, guys. That's how you deal with functions in JavaScript. Happy coding, and make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Thank you.